Thanks for listening to the Open Discourse podcast. In this series, ODC co-founder and CEO Charles Mitchell sits down for a candid conversation with thought leaders, elected officials, entrepreneurs, and today, a student. He is joined by Sam DeLuca, a senior at Bucknell University and an ODC student fellow.
Sam DeLuca, first student guest on the Open Discourse podcast. Welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be the first student on here.
I love how it's all come together. And Sam, we got some important things to talk about. One of them is on your face.
Yeah.
What's with the mustache?
Yeah, so I'm sporting the mustache for the month of November. It's part of my fraternity's philanthropy event we put on November. We all grow a mustache or whatever facial hair we can. I've been blessed that I can grow some facial hair, but to bring awareness to men's mental health and prostate cancer. So this is a good opportunity for me to sport it on a social media platform and kind of bring awareness that way. But yeah, I've been doing it for 3 years, and I will say I won the best mustache last year in my fraternity. But we raised over $40,000 at Bucknell, which puts us up there nationally with raising money for this event. So yeah, perfect opportunity for me to display that.
Well, congratulations, Sam. That's an impressive raise. It's also some impressive facial hair. Some of my grandparents came from Sicily and Italy. I think we have some heritage in common. And although I have restrained myself since I'm not in your fraternity and have an office job, I think we share, some prodigious capabilities in the facial hair department. In addition to our other commonality of both being residents of Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Why don't you, if you would, say a little for our audience about what you're studying at Bucknell, what year you are, where you came from, how you got there. Would just be great for some of our listeners to hear your story.
Surely, yeah. So I'm a senior economics major at Bucknell. I have a religious studies minor. I come from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I was born and raised there. It's a town south of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I came to Bucknell initially to play football. My career was cut short, unfortunately, by a back injury, but I've since pivoted and put some of that effort that I used for football into the Open Discourse Coalition and leadership roles in my fraternity. But yeah, Mechanicsburg, it's a little town. Went to public high school. Loved every second of my football career at Mechanicsburg. My little brother's there right now. I go back. I'm close enough in Lewisburg where I can go back and kind of stay involved with the football team and watch my brothers sometimes. So I'm blessed to be at Bucknell and blessed to be from that town. Yeah.
Love it. Sam, I had a previous guest, guy named Bill Groover.
Oh, yeah.
You of course know, but our listeners might not, that you just graduated from Professor Groover's leadership seminar. I don't know if he talks about this in the seminar since the Vegas rules apply and I'm not allowed to know anything about what goes on in there. But Professor Groover talked on the podcast about his own football injury and how it took him years to recover. I actually had never heard him speak about it publicly before, and it was really powerful to hear that. I'm of course delighted to hear you say that in terms of your focus going forward, that ODC has given you an outlet for your energies, which I can attest are pretty substantial. Since Professor Gruber delved into this topic, how have you rebounded so successfully from your injury?
Yeah, so Professor Gruber and I actually kind of bonded on this point. When I first met him, I believe his injury was concussions. Mine was my back. Yeah, so we got along very well on that topic, or at least we were able to relate to each other, which kind of, it's always good to have a good relationship with your professors. But yeah, I think when you lose something like football, or for me, it was such a big thing in my life, and I've talked to a lot of kids, a lot of students at Bucknell. I hope I could have been a good resource for them, just on, because it does happen. I mean, around half the college football players that go in at the level that we play at Bucknell end up not finishing. And you lose, the main point is you lose a sense of identity. You lose your purpose. and the identity crisis is hard to deal with. And I did have a little stint where I was a little lost without football. I missed it a lot. But that identity part, I really found meaning in that through my work and through my role in the fraternity. But more importantly, I think for this context, my work, I was working. My first job after I stopped playing football was with a lobbying firm in Harrisburg. But in addition to that, I worked for a representative at the state level, and a lot of the work she was doing there was really good. It was criminal justice reform. I believe the act that I worked on with her was the Clean Slate Act, and it was about getting people with misdemeanor drug crimes, not cleaning their record, but adjusting the process so that they could get jobs. And that was like the start for me with public policy, and I really liked that. So that kind of the policy, being the guy that somebody could go to answer questions, that kind of became my identity. And it's really been great for me. I think, and we'll get into a little later about the book that I brought for today. But that finding your purpose, that it's important. And even though I lost football, I found a different avenue, and thankfully it came into my life relatively quickly, or I could have spiraled. But yeah.
That's an awesome story, Sam. It's amazing how people come together in ways that they never could have anticipated. You and I have never talked about this before, but I was also involved in that legislation. In my previous life as a public policy executive in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, was involved in 3 different rounds of criminal justice reform, that being one of them. So we didn't know each other, but we were both pushing for the same thing. Me on the private sector side, you on the public sector side. You are one of the people who inspired a recent Open Discourse Coalition program, which we're going to talk about in about 90 seconds. But I'd love for you to share from your perspective for our listeners, how did you get connected originally to the Open Discourse Coalition, and what about it appealed to you?
So initially I got involved because our fraternity chaperone, Ed Robinson, was very involved with the ODC, and he used to let me know when things were happening, and when a speaker was being held, and I'd come along. And I think the first big event that I went to was the one with Rand Paul. And I got to meet Rand Paul, and I was more than satisfied with the conversation, the questions being asked. I thought it was so cool. I didn't know that we had people of that high caliber in Little Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and the organization behind it was the Open Discourse Coalition. So naturally, given what I want to do and that event, I wanted to be involved with it. And then I got offered, or I got recommended, I believe, by Ed to sign up for the leadership seminar. Really enjoyed that, and I wanted to stay involved again, given what I want to do. But I think the beauty of the Open Discourse Coalition is its goal is to overturn the current trends going on with my generation right now, college students, and using violence against people who you disagree with on policy issues. And I think that the longer I've worked behind the scenes in politics, the more I realize that the conversations that go on, on the Hill, in that building, they're not as hateful as people would expect. There's a lot of humility and a lot of civility up there, despite what's on the news. So I guess I would just like to see people my age get along, even though they disagree. And I think that's the Open Discourse Coalition's goal, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Proud to have you. And I do remember you being at the Rand Paul event, and I think that's when the discussion started about the most recent event that we did, and hopefully we'll have time later to come back to the leadership seminar. But let's talk about what just happened when Senator Rand Paul came to Bucknell. You're right that it is a little out of the ordinary for someone of such stature to come to little Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. We're working to make that normal because it should be. It's a great place.
I agree.
You and I began a conversation about the reverse, about bringing some people from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C., and you volunteered to start finding some of your fellow students who'd be interested in that, whether they are interested in the kind of career path that you are, or just for other reasons, who would really benefit from being able to get down to D.C. and to meet some of the people who make our government function. And I'm delighted that we were able to facilitate that here very recently. When you and I originally talked about it, Sam, as you know, we thought, it's going to take some lead time to do this well, and maybe we'll do something in spring of 2026. But through a whole conglomeration of various pieces of generosity from a number of people, including Senator Dave McCormick and his team, we pulled it together a little more quickly than we planned.
We did, yeah. Came up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Glad it.
Yeah, I'm glad we did it too. So why don't you sketch that out for our audience? What is it that we just pulled off in DC, and probably more importantly than just the what happened, although the stuff that happened was pretty cool. What have you seen since in terms of how it has impacted yourself and your fellow students? You recruited a lot of the other students, right? So you can speak not just to your experience, but to some of the conversations that have happened since then. So tell the story, Sam.
Yeah, so Charles and I started talking about getting this plan probably a year and a half ago over lunch in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. And it kind of came to fruition probably a week after we initially started to try and plan out, how we're going to recruit, the logistics of it all. And we got an opportunity to go down and meet and greet Senator McCormick and hear some of the things he had planned for Pennsylvania and the United States. I believe they reached out to you and were like, we're doing this. We got spots. You want to come? And we kind of did it. Sent out an email. I think it filled up pretty quickly with students who were interested. I contacted some of my friends who wanted to get into law or want to work in DC. They were ecstatic to not only get down there, but also meet, the potential to meet a sitting U.S. Senator it's a once in a lifetime thing for a lot of people. And it was super cool. So that's how it kind of came to fruition. And then once we got down there, oh wait, I forgot, last minute, we had the opportunity through the golf coach here at Bucknell, who knows a broadcaster on Fox News, to tour that and get the behind the scenes look at Fox News. So we did that on Tuesday night, late at night. Mike Emanuel showed us through Fox News. We got to see the background, how everything works in there. And it was really good. I like to call it's the media branch of government. We saw all four. So we got the media branch on Tuesday night, and then early Wednesday morning, we went to Senator McCormick's office. We all had the opportunity to shake his hand and take a picture, but also ask him questions. There were a lot of good things, a lot of good questions asked about not only Pennsylvania, but the United States. And I actually shook Senator McCormick's hand and said, I'm Sam DeLuca. I'm from Bucknell University at the Open Discourse Coalition. And he was like, you know what? I know about the Open Discourse Coalition, and hinted at a little something that might be going on, said straight to my face. And
you can talk about that, Sam. Go ahead.
I can talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we might be getting Senator McCormick and John Fetterman to Bucknell University here in the short future. But I think that'll be great. He talked about Fetterman a little bit in our conversation, and how, he has good terms, is on good terms with him. And that's inspiring, to me, especially being a part of the Open Discourse Coalition and our goals. But besides that, we had a great meeting with Senator McCormick. Then we went over to my old boss's office in the house in the Cannon office building. We got to meet the staff. I got to share kind of what I did as an intern for him. Some of the staff shared what they do. And then one of the staff there. Jackson took us down to the Committee on Financial Services. We got to see the committee hearing room. We got to sit in the chairs there, and I think that was cool. We got to pick Jackson's brain a little bit about what he does, and he's a very insightful guy, so that was great.
And all y'all behaved yourselves, and none of y'all got kicked out of a seat like I did.
No, yeah, Charles did try to sit in the chairman's seat. That was a no-no. But to be fair, I thought about doing it too.
They said sit anywhere you want, and I took them at their word. And
as you should.
That was funny. But and that, I love. I mean, just the story you've told thus far, Sam. One of the things we talk a lot about at ODC is relationships. Well, how did you and your fellow students get behind the curtain at the largest cable news network? Because of a relationship, because Coach Mike Binney from the golf team has built a friendship with an individual there. And how did you get to meet a sitting United States Senator? And oh, by the way, I mean, he gave you guys half an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And he answered questions. And I'm not lionizing him. That's not what this is about. But I've been around politics for a long time. Anybody getting half an hour from a United States Senator, let alone a bunch of college students, I think really validates what you said, which is he's aware of who we are and what we do. He became aware of it, as you stated, because we've been working for about a year, along with Bucknell President John Brobman, to attempt to find a date for Senator Fetterman and Senator McCormick, who are from different parties, as you know, to have a dialogue at Bucknell, because that's our mission. And I think it tells you something that a sitting U.S. Senator thought that was so important and thought that was so impressive that he extended that invitation to you and your fellow students. And then, as you stated, why did we get to go over to the other side of the Capitol in the midst, we haven't said this out loud yet, in the midst of a shutdown?
That is very true.
All those people who were hosting us were working for free, could have been doing something else. But why did they do that? Well, they did it because of relationships. And the relationships on the House side were your relationships with a Bucknell parent who serves in the House of Representatives. And, look, again, I've been around this process for a long time. It isn't normal to be invited into the congressman's office when he's not there and have a dialogue with his chief of staff. And that's what happened. And that happened because of relationships, and it happened because of relationships that grew out of, at least as I see it, they grew out of our mission and those folks in the government in D.C. being excited about our mission. And I appreciate that you brought up the thing with Senator McCormick and Senator Fetterman, because I very much hope that that's the next thing we'll be able to do together is to bring those two guys to Lewisburg in 2026. The only thing that'd be better than bringing the sitting United States Senator that caused you and me to be talking more would be to bring two at one time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you should keep going, though. So from there, we went to lunch, and then the afternoon, we covered two other branches of government.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, too, with Congressman Muser's office and my relationship with them, they're aware of the Open Discourse Coalition. I'm in contact with a couple of people in that office, and they're all for the mission of our organization too. So I think it's important to note that there's people in government that care about open discourse and civil dialogue. So
and Congressman Muser, by the way, has done two ODC programs himself. So it's one thing to say that, right? I mean, we all know that politicians sometimes say things, but other than how many football games he went to see Danny, he came to campus twice just for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So going forward, we went to lunch, and then we went to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, which is not something I was super familiar with, but it was great. We got to interact with Judge Maggs. He was very insightful. I mean, we asked him a lot of. We had a guy who was part of the JAG Corps, or wants to be part of the JAG Corps in our group that went down there, and he definitely picked his brains. But I learned so much from that, just how they treat crime differently in the armed forces than normal civilian life. I wasn't super aware of that. So super informative for me. I know the guys that I brought were impressed, and they learned a lot. Some of them wanted to practice law, and then we got to go back to his chamber too and see his whole setup there, which was really cool experience. Didn't know what to expect from it, and I think I got a lot out of it, so that was great. And then I don't mean to be biased here, but it might have been my favorite stop on the tour. We went to the Secretary of State's office and met with his counselor, Mike Needham, and we all got to sit down around a round table and pick his brain about things. I mean, the Secretary of State's office, they handle a lot of things, so everything from tariffs to, foreign policy, different wars. Students and I got to ask a lot of good questions, and he was super insightful. Had a sense of humor too, which was good. Was always refreshing. And then we got probably the greatest tour, and I did tours in the Capitol. I thought my tours were pretty good. No, I forget her name. I apologize, but she gave the best tour I have ever received from anyone, anywhere. She knew the history behind the tint in the ceilings to the price of everything in there. The stories behind some of the paintings were incredible. Who was who did the painting? What was their purpose? I believe I don't know. It was incredible. I was in awe the entire time. It was great. And then from that, we pivoted to the alumni reception at Hogan Lovell's law office, beautiful law offices in Washington, D.C. I got to speak a little bit about the Open Discourse Coalition and what we had done in front of some Bucknell alumni. And I got to connect with, and along with the other students, got to connect with some great, distinguished Bucknell alumni, anywhere from law to Hill staffers, some think tank people. So it was great. The entire trip was great. The feedback I'm getting from students is that, they're getting emails and numbers from people. They're in contact with them now, especially, being in that law office, the people who want to get into law. It's been great. So I'm super glad, we got it going, and we had the opportunity to go do that. Even if it was on short notice, we made it work. And I hope it becomes a trend at the Open Discourse Coalition long after I'm not a student at Bucknell, because it was good. So thank you, Charles. Obviously, I've said that to you before this, but it was great. And Dawn too. I'll give a shout out to Dawn and Coach Benny. So yeah, great.
My honor, Sam. And this is a great case study of why we recently established our Student Fellows program at ODC, of which you're one, because ideas should flow both ways. I mean, that's open discourse, right? There are all sorts of good ideas that people like Dawn Taguchi, our executive director, and I originate. But why did this work so well? And I admit I have a conflict of interest in saying that it worked so well, but I think it's self-evident. It worked so well because ideas flowed both ways. It met a need that you articulated on behalf of other students. Yes, I brought some resources to bear. Mike Needham, whom we met with, is a guy I've known for quite a while. We kind of came up through the ranks together in D.C. Also, his father, George, is a Bucknellian. And, there were some things like that I was happy to bring to the table. But it only really worked because it met a real need that a student articulated. I love having you on here to tell the story because it's something that I try to articulate on behalf of students to our donors, without whom the trip couldn't have happened. This is the way this works is not just I or other old people come up with great ideas and impose them on you guys. It runs both ways, and I think this is such a clear example of that. Now, the lady you mentioned earlier, I think she does deserve some love. So, Sam, you were referring to Virginia Hart, who is the curator of the United States State Department's diplomatic reception rooms. I think there's another remarkable thing there in the sense that, I keep hearing Professor Groover use the term providence. It didn't feel like providence when we started putting this trip together, knowing that there was a shutdown coming and maybe it'll be over, maybe it won't. Then, as you know, it got closer and closer and closer, and certain things got even more difficult because of the shutdown. Well, had there not been a shutdown, there would have been something else going on in the diplomatic receiving rooms, and therefore you and your fellow students would not have had the opportunity to walk through them. And furthermore, Virginia, who, as you point out, is amazing, most assuredly, she would have been with some ambassador or something like that. So just providential that we had that opportunity. And, when I replay all that in my mind, I feel like in the space of 24 hours, we all had probably 4 once-in-a-lifetime experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many of the 300 million people in our country have ever spent half an hour with a U.S. senator? Or any of the other things that you laid out, especially the diplomatic reception rooms. I mean, you talked about the tint of the ceiling. I mean, the paintings that are in there, the people who've walked those halls. I mean, I have a picture of you and your fellow students standing at the Secretary of State's private dining table.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, you think about the people who have walked through those halls, and I was talking to Congressman Muser's staff afterwards. They're like, "Yeah, I've never done that." Some of them have been there for a couple of years, and they're, no, I've never done that tour. And I've done some cool tours in Washington D.C. I had the opportunity to do the Dome tour, which is the rotunda at the United States Capitol building. You can go up, and there's a spiral staircase all the way up the rotunda, and you get to look down and see the mural up top, and there's so much hidden history back there too. And then you get to go up on the top of the dome and take a picture, and it's a great view of them all. So, I mean, it was incredible. And you were talking about the need that was filled. I think part of that need also was when I was working in Washington, D.C., some of the other college students I was working there with, most of them go to American or, George Washington, Georgetown, whatever. So they're in D.C., we talk about at the Open Discourse Coalition a little bit, the importance of networking. And if you want to have a career in DC, it's important to build a network and stay involved. So being in Lewisburg, I mean, we're not that far away. We're 3.5 hours. That's not that far, but we're not right there. So getting students there just to see what opportunities are there and to connect with some people there face to face. It opens up so many doors, and it's super important. And that's part of the reason why I hope it continues after I'm not a student here anymore. But yeah, that need's important, and it was filled.
Well, let's plan on keeping it going, and hopefully you'll be in DC and you'll be one of our next alumni speakers. There's one more bit of the trip that I think bears mention, Sam. As you know, it wouldn't have happened without the generosity of many people. Hotel rooms cost money, and we rely on our donors for that. But in particular, maybe you could share a bit with our audience about how we got there. It was one of the nicest vehicles that I've ever inhabited. I don't know about you, and that also came through the generosity of one of our fellow Bucknellians.
Yeah, the bus. The March bus, I believe it was called. I the name of the person who donated that is
Scott Henry.
Scott Henry. That's right. I knew his first name was Scott. I couldn't think of his last name. But yeah, that first of all is probably the nicest bus I've ever been on, let alone I had to pay for it. So that incredibly generous and made our trip so much easier. And also shout out to the driver, because that dude took that bus through Washington, D.C. into some narrow gaps for us to mingle around the city for a day. So yeah, thank you to both of them. I mean, it's huge.
Yes, our driver Angelo was fantastic, and we're very grateful for Scott Henry and Mart's bus's generosity. It definitely made it a lot better to have those wheels.
Yeah.
Let's pivot for a sec, Sam, if you don't mind. I think you've beautifully laid out what happened recently in DC. One of the gateways for that experience for you was being part of ODC's leadership seminar taught by Bill Gruber. A lot of our listeners were students of Professor Gruber's decades ago. I think they'd love to hear a little from you as to what your experience was like in the leadership seminar, why it was valuable, and what it's like to be a student of Gruber these days.
Yeah, so I'm sure not much has changed from when some of the viewers may have had Professor Gruber, and since I've had him for 4 Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. But he's straight up. He says it how it is, and I can appreciate that. But I think, one thing about, and I'll start with this, one thing from that seminar, one piece of advice that I got just based on the conversation we were having. He said that intelligent people change their minds, which I think not only ties into, what we do at the Open Discourse Coalition, but it also is, I mean, in today's political day and age, so you got to be comfortable with changing your mind. And I think a lot of the times, at least in my life, you get stuck in the partisan thing and believing one thing because your party believes in that. And when he said that, we weren't talking really about policy necessarily, more social issues, but I think it's so true. Intelligent people change their mind. And there were little bits of, and I think I wrote a couple down in my notes, but intelligent people change their mind. That was a big thing I took from that. But on top of that, the opportunities that I got during or in that class, things that I never would have gotten from a normal Bucknell class. I mean, I got to host Chris Richards and then introduce her to the students in the class, and she senior vice president of FedEx for a very long time. She was the vice president of legal and government affairs. So a lot of the stuff she was talking about, she adores Fred Keller, but hearing her talk about that and some of the issues she had to deal with coming up as a woman in that sort of atmosphere, it was great. And we got to hear from a number of distinguished Bucknell alumni and connect with them. That was amazing. And obviously something you don't really get in a normal Bucknell class. But on top of that, we dove into some world leaders and saw how they were successful, which in Professor Gruber's analysis means enacting change. And we had some good conversation around, I believe it was Queen Elizabeth. We got to dive into some world leaders and basically just see how or if they were successful. The leadership class isn't framed around how to be a good leader, but you take things away from that class that will, get into my professional life, I'm sure, in the future. I want to coach football eventually somewhere down the road and make an impact on people's lives. So I took away a lot from that class.
That's great. Sam, as you know, there are 3 questions I ask everybody who appears on this podcast. You already answered one without being asked, which is why you're so passionate about our mission here at ODC, which makes all the sense in the world that you're part of the team. I do want to ask you the other 2. I'm going to ask you one other question first. You're wearing your Studley Open Discourse Coalition vest. Yep. There are 3 ways to get those vests. One is to graduate from the leadership seminar, which you did. The second is to be a speaker, which some of our previous guests and some of our listeners have been speakers. And the third is to be a donor. So to those who are watching and asking, how can I get one of those vests? OpenDiscourseCoalition.org/donate is the answer to that. Now, having said that, Sam, those folks who've already clicked that link have made all the experiences that you've summarized on this podcast possible. And the question I wanted to ask you before asking you the last two questions in our conversation today is simply this. Is there anything else that you want to say to our donors who made these experiences possible that I haven't already asked you?
Yeah. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for providing us with the space to talk about things openly, to learn from people who have different perspectives, because, college campuses don't always offer that. And I think, just alumni recognizing that and supporting the ODC and your mission is incredibly important. And I have gotten a tremendous amount of experience and lessons learned through the Open Discourse Coalition. And I do recognize that none of that could be possible without the donors. So I thank them.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Okay. Last two questions. Number one, what's a great book that you recommend to our listeners? You teased that you'd thought about this, so I'm waiting to hear, man.
Seen the podcast. I know you asked this question. So The Alchemist. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Huh.
It's by Paulo Coelho. I'm probably butchering his name. He's Portuguese, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
But it's basically, some people frame it as a self-help book. I don't really think so. I think it's a good story. It's about a shepherd who gets a sign from God that he's to be an alchemist, which an alchemist is, you can change material into something else using magic, I think the book says. But it takes him through this journey of, he's starting out, he leaves his job as a shepherd, which is super comfortable, super stable. And then he goes and leaves everything, sells everything, gets robbed. So now he's down to nothing. And he builds his way back up at this glass shop. And then he built the glass shop into this, very profitable industry. And then but he still wants to be an alchemist. So he drops that gig, and then he goes throughout this journey in the desert. And during the journey, I won't spoil it for anyone, but he just confronts his fears. And he has to make sacrifices with some of the people in his life. And at the end, everything works out. So I think The Alchemist it's the core theme, and is that you're going to have to sacrifice things and everything will work out in the end. And there's a lot of detail in the book that I think every time, I've read it probably 4 or 5 times, and every time I read it, I pick out something different. And, I talked about purpose earlier. For young people who might be watching this, and old, it doesn't really matter. But every time I read it, I get something new out of it. I think it's a good book.
Awesome. Strong recommendation.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, last question. Your favorite world historical leader, who is it?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to be cliche and go with Ronald Reagan. I know I'm a young Republican, and I just think when you look at Ronald Reagan, his charisma and his de-escalating nature, and he's a proponent of world peace and capitalism and prosperity for all. I think Ronald Reagan is the model Republican, and who doesn't love a good California Republican? And I know it sounds cliche, but I that's the first person who comes to mind.
Love it. You're talking to a guy who had a Ronald Reagan poster on his wall in the iconic, I'm colorblind, so it was either the green or brown suit, but the one they said the color you should never wear if you're the president, he wore it and he looked good.
Yeah.
So he was on my wall in Harris Hall.
Professor Gruber will appreciate my reference to charisma, because it's not only does Professor Gruber have charisma, but it's an important quality of a good leader. He'll get that reference.
Yeah, I think you did a good job of managing up with that answer, Sam. You You certainly hit one of my favorites. You hit one of Professor Gruber's favorites. You also had the same answer as our board chair, Judge Susan Crawford, former chief judge of the court that you visited in Washington. So if we were grading, which we're not, I think you probably won't get a C for cliche on that one. You'll probably do okay.
Good.
Well, Sam, it's an honor to do this work for the benefit of students like yourself, and it's a pleasure to do it with you. Thank you so much for bringing a good idea to my attention and for going on that awesome adventure in DC and for being my guest today on the Open Discourse podcast.
Thank you for having me, Charles.